Texarkana, 1946. A picturesque, peaceful community nestled along the Texas-Arkansas border, where post-war optimism filled the air and young love blossomed along moonlit roads. But everything changed on February 22nd, when an unseen predator emerged from the shadows. A masked gunman began a reign of terror, haunting isolated roads and striking fear into the hearts of couples seeking solitude. Over 10 chilling weeks, 5 lives would be stolen, 3 more shattered forever. Newspapers dubbed him the Phantom Killer. Then, just as mysteriously as he arrived, he vanished, leaving behind unanswered questions that linger unsolved more than 75 years later. Who was this masked phantom? And what caused him to disappear as suddenly as he appeared? Welcome to Mystery Trails, where we uncover chilling true crime, baffling disappearances, and unexplained events across the U.S. If you love a good mystery, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share with your friends to help us grow. Now, let's start exploring the unknown together and dive on into the story. In 1946, Texarkana was a thriving hub, brimming with life as soldiers returned home and families embraced a sense of normalcy after the war. Drive-in theaters flickered with Hollywood dreams, diners buzzed with youthful chatter, and lovers stole quiet moments beneath starry skies. Yet in the spring, innocence turned to dread. After the first brutal attack, panic gripped the community. Residents bolted doors, barred windows, and imposed self-curfews. No longer did laughter echo down lovers' lanes, only silence, broken occasionally by whispers that the phantom might still be watching. The nightmare began just before midnight on February 22, 1946, along a quiet stretch of rich road in Texarkana. It was the kind of place where young couples went to escape the world for a while. A narrow gravel road, edged by trees that whispered when the wind moved through. That night, 25-year-old Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend, 19-year-old Mary Jean Larry, parked beneath the moonlight, hoping for a few moments of peace and privacy. But what they got instead was something out of a waking nightmare. As they sat in the car, the stillness was broken, not by footsteps or rustling leaves, but by an overwhelming sense that they were being watched. Then, without warning, a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the beams of the car's headlights. He wore a crude white mask, not a Halloween mask, not even a sackcloth, but something that looked homemade, roughly cut with eye holes, hollow and black, like a skull staring back at them. In one hand, he held a blinding flashlight, which he aimed straight at Jimmy's face. In the other, a pistol, gripped tightly, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. The man didn't speak at first. He just stood there, watching, breathing. Then came the orders. Jimmy and Mary Jean were forced from the car. Before Jimmy could plead or even move, the stranger struck, bludgeoning him with the barrel of the gun, cracking his skull with terrifying force. Jimmy collapsed, blood streaming across his face, the gravel soaking it in. Then the attacker turned to Mary Jean. He didn't rush. He didn't rage. He was calm, cold, calculated. He tormented her, threatened to kill her, and then violently assaulted her, using the very weapon he'd used to beat her boyfriend. His words made little sense. They were disjointed, cruel, almost mocking. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished into the woods, leaving the couple broken and bleeding beneath the stars. Amazingly, they survived. But this was no one-time act of violence. It was only the beginning. Texarkana wouldn't sleep soundly again for months, because the phantom had just stepped out of the shadows. Less than a month after the first attack, Texarkana was plunged back into darkness. On the morning of March 24th, 1946, a driver spotted a parked car along a secluded stretch of road just outside the city limits. Inside were the lifeless bodies of 29-year-old Richard Griffin and 17-year-old Polly Ann Moore. They hadn't stood a chance. Both had been shot execution style, the killer taking his time to arrange them with eerie precision. Richard slumped in the front seat. Polly Ann sprawled beside him. There were no signs of robbery, no fingerprints, no blood trail, just the still terrifying silence of a crime that had no clear motive, only method. The press called it a double murder. The townsfolk called it what it felt like, a message. And whatever that message was, it wasn't over. On the night of April 13th, 2 more young souls vanished into the shadows. Paul Martin, 17, had picked up his friend Betty Jo Booker, a talented 15-year-old saxophonist, after she played a Saturday night dance with her school band. They never came home. Paul's body was found the next morning, shot 4 times and left near the side of North Park Road, like he'd tried to run but never got far. Betty Jo's body wouldn't be found until later that day, nearly 2 miles away, deep in the brush. She'd been shot in the face and chest. Her saxophone case was still clutched in her arms, as if she'd tried to protect it in her final moments. Or maybe she was just holding on to the last part of herself that hadn't been taken. The brutality was escalating, and so was the fear. By then, the town of Texarkana was suffocating under its own silence. People boarded up their windows, bought guns they didn't know how to use, and whispered the name of the one behind it all like a curse, the Phantom Killer. Whoever he was, he wasn't finished. Not yet. On the quiet night of May 3rd, 1946, Virgil and Katie Starks had settled in for the evening at their farmhouse just 10 miles outside Texarkana. The air was still, the radio hummed softly, and the world beyond their walls seemed far away. Virgil sat in his favorite chair reading the paper. Katie was nearby, slipping into her nightgown, preparing for bed, unaware that something was already watching them from just beyond the window pane. Then, without warning, the silence shattered. A shot rang out, then another. Glass exploded inward as 2 .22 caliber bullets ripped through the window and struck Virgil in the back of the head, killing him instantly. He slumped forward, his paper falling into a growing pool of blood. Katie screamed, but before she could reach him, a 3rd bullet tore into her face, shattering her jaw and knocking out teeth. Somehow, even in the haze of pain and panic, she didn't collapse. Instead, she ran, wounded, bleeding, barely able to see, through the house and out into the dark night, barefoot and broken in search of help. She made it to a neighbor's house nearly half a mile away. By the time authorities arrived, the Phantom was gone, swallowed once again by the darkness and the back roads of Texarkana. No footprints, no fingerprints, just blood, broken glass, and a town now completely paralyzed by fear. This time, it hadn't been a lover's lane or a parked car. The Phantom had come straight to their home. And with that, Texarkana knew the truth. No one was safe anymore. In the weeks that followed, law enforcement swarmed Texarkana like hornets, desperate to catch a killer who always seemed just one step ahead. Patrols doubled. Curfews were set. Doors that had never known locks were bolted shut, and neighbors began to look at one another with quiet suspicion. The investigation was relentless, but ultimately fruitless. Detectives questioned hundreds. Every drifter, ex-con, and strange face that passed through town was stopped and interrogated. Roadblocks were set up. Tips poured in, most of them leading nowhere. They followed footprints into the woods and chased whispers down alleyways, but in the end, all they found were shadows. One detail offered a glimmer of consistency. A .32 caliber Colt automatic pistol was believed to have been used in several of the murders. But even that clue was frustratingly vague. The weapon was common, and nothing about it brought them any closer to the man behind the mask. Then, unexpectedly, a suspect emerged. Someone local. Someone with a past. And for a moment, hope flickered that this nightmare might finally have a face. But as investigators would soon learn, in a case soaked in fear and speculation, even the most promising lead could unravel into something stranger than fiction. A man named Youell Swinney, a petty criminal known more for stealing cars than killing people, was arrested for auto theft. On the surface, he seemed like just another small-time hustler. But when authorities questioned his young wife, Peggy, the case took a sudden, chilling turn. Peggy, shaken and emotional, told investigators Youell was the phantom killer. She described the attacks in vivid detail. Information that hadn't been made public. She claimed she had witnessed the horrors firsthand, watching from a distance as her husband carried out the murders, calm and merciless beneath the cover of night. Her confessions stunned police. Finally, a face to the mask, a name to the nightmare. But there was a problem. Peggy couldn't testify. As Swinney's wife, spousal privilege laws of the time protected her from being forced to take the stand against him. And without her testimony, without physical evidence, fingerprints, or a murder weapon, the case began to unravel. Youell Swinney was never charged with murder. Instead, he was locked away on a technicality, a lengthy sentence for car theft that kept him behind bars until 1973. And here's the part that haunted everyone who worked the case. After his arrest, the killings stopped. No more masked figures, no more bloodied saxophones or shattered windows, just silence. For some, that was enough to believe Swinney was guilty. That justice, in some twisted way, had been served. But for others, the whole thing felt too clean, too convenient. Was Youell Swinney truly the phantom killer? Or had the real murderer simply vanished with the wind, leaving behind a convenient scapegoat and a city still sleeping with the lights on? Despite Youell Swinney's imprisonment, doubt clung to his guilt like a fog that wouldn't lift. Some investigators, even years later, questioned whether he truly was the phantom, or if the town, desperate for peace, had simply settled for an answer that was easy to believe. After all, Peggy's confession was the only real thread tying him to the crimes. And it was a thread that couldn't be pulled in court. Others believe the truth is far more unsettling. One theory suggests the phantom was a transient predator, a drifter who passed through Texarkana like a storm, striking with brutal precision and vanishing into the highway dust before anyone could stop him. Someone who had no ties, no motive, and no need to linger. Another possibility is even more unnerving, that there wasn't just one phantom. Some speculate that the media coverage, breathless headlines and radio reports, may have inspired others to mimic the crimes, that there may have been multiple killers acting independently but following the same terrifying pattern. Not coordinated, just caught in the same twisted current. But perhaps the most disturbing theory of all? That the phantom's identity was known, not by the public, but by someone in power. A name scribbled in a file, a face recognized behind closed doors, that in an effort to keep panic from consuming the city, local authorities buried the truth and quietly ensured the phantom disappeared into history without a trial, without a headline, without a trace. If that's true, if the real killer walked free while Swinney sat in prison for a crime he didn't commit, then the haunting question remains: was justice ever truly served? Or did Texarkana make a deal with silence in exchange for peace? The Phantom Killer's reign of terror forever changed Texarkana. His legacy endured through hushed whispers, local legends, and eventually inspired the cult horror film The Town That Dreaded Sundown. More than 75 years later, the chilling questions remain unanswered. Who was the Phantom Killer? Why did he stop killing? Or, most disturbing, did he ever truly stop? What do you think? Was the Phantom Killer ever caught? Or did he simply move on to another town, another night? If you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries and eerie legends, hit that subscribe button now to join us on Mystery Trails. Stay tuned for our next spine-chilling case, because some mysteries are meant to haunt us forever.